This is our carburetor for a Bella, Zundat Bella 154 kickstart. It's a Bing carburetor. It's stamped 12019. That means it's a single carburetor slide. 20 millimeter intake, 19 is the model. So if you call Bing USA, the number's on the internet, they can get you all the parts for this. This is our main throttle chamber where the throttle slide is. This is our choke chamber, and this is our float bowl. I'm going to start here. A common misconception is that there's supposed to be a gasket here. There is no gasket that's required here. There's an overflow here, so if it's overfilled, it'll drain off and you may have a float problem. To take this apart, there's a screw at the bottom. It's supposed to have a gasket on it. See, this one does. And inside here is where the needle that holds the float is. You just need to take it out this way. A common problem, you can see that this is the way that the float sits. Okay, Bing is on the bottom. Okay. A common problem is that this, get focused here, this taper can get rotten, and you can order a new one of these from Bing. There's a small groove in this needle. That's what's holding the float in place, so that when it goes through the bottom of the chamber, it'll go until it clicks. Okay, and that's the way it's held. This is your fuel intake from your gas tank petcock. There's a gasket on this on both sides. On either side. This is the bottom of your choke chamber. It has a gasket. These bolts, so to speak, you can't put them in the wrong position. There's only one size, except for these two jet holders, the high and the low or idle. This is the idle and this is the high. These two are the same. Okay, so you just need to make sure that when you take these off, they have gaskets, of course. You need to make sure that these jets are the correct jets. So this is going to be a 45 for idle, and this one's going to be a 110, 115, something like that. It's got a gasket, and there's your jet that you unscrew and blow out and clean. So these two are interchangeable. You don't want to mix the two up. You want the larger jet on the high side. There's an H that tells you that that's the high jet. This is simply your throttle, bottoms out your throttle so that you can set your idle. Okay, you look inside this chamber, that's just a bolt that's keeping the throttle slide from going down too far, or setting it so you can raise it so you can adjust your idle. So it's got a locking nut, and that's for adjusting your idle. This is your air idle screw. If you read the Bella engine manual, it tells you exactly where to set it. It's got a screw on it, a spring on it. So you can see there's a screw, or a spring. This just fits in here. You turn it in all the way. This is the first setting that you do. You turn it in all the way and you back it out 1 1/4 to 1 1/2. It's as easy as that. So go all the way in till it bottoms out. I've got the wrong screwdriver. Till it's tight, and then you back it out 1 1/4 to 1 1/2. That's a fairly standard setting. Just do that, and then you can adjust your idle here. Okay. At the bottom of this main throttle slide chamber, again, this cover with the gasket doesn't fit anywhere else. It's a 17 millimeter to get that off. And inside here you'll see it takes an 8 millimeter wrench, and you can take out this main jet. Okay, this will be marked. It's 1608 marking on there. So you can blow that out to make sure that that's okay. It just sits in the bottom of this chamber. There's no gaskets or anything like that. If you look down, the needle from the throttle slide is what's going down in that hole into this jet. When you take this main jet out, you'll notice at the bottom that there's a fitting that will come out. You'll see that there is only one position for it to go in. This is your idle that you can lock. Okay, there's a small cutout that shows you which direction this goes in. You can see at the bottom of the choke chamber, which is this chamber, the choke slide. This is a fixed brass fitting. It does not come out. However, at the bottom, the cap that covers the choke slide that has a gasket, has a jet in it. I forget what the number is, but you can take that out and clean it out well. There is no way to put this back together wrong, okay? Once you take it apart and lay everything out in front of you, there's only one way that everything goes back together, except for these two jet holders, the idle and the high jet. So just make sure you're putting the right jet back in and you'll be fine. So the 45 over here and the 110 or 115 over here. Once everything's taken apart, you can soak it, you can cook it, boil it, whatever you want to do to clean it. Toothbrush, ultrasonic, you know, it's fairly forgiving. I just use carb cleaner, a can of it for $4 at the auto parts store, and I just blow everything out. And make sure not to blow these tiny jets out of your hand when you're cleaning them out. It's as simple as that. You can't put it back together wrong. Just don't lose pieces, you know. And it's the simplest carburetor in the world to work on. Setting it is, again, so easy. The air idle screw goes in all the way, and you back it off 1 1/4 to 1 1/2. Make sure there are gaskets everywhere. There's no gasket for the top of the float bowl, as many people think. The level is well below this overflow, so it looks complicated, but it's really not. It goes back together one way and only one way. This is your fuel petcock. When you take your body off, just want to make sure you slide that out. Okay. And use your key to turn it on and off. This is easy to rebuild. I have the cork if you need it. This is your choke slide. It's very simple. This is an 11mm nut on this cover. There's a spring. The choke cable goes through, and this is very important. The bottom of this plunger had a fibrous or gel-like component that rots away. It needs to be plugged up, so I plug it with a piece of cork. If there's an opening here, any air goes through, your bike will not start or run or idle well at all. So make sure that there's two styles of choke plunger. There's this long one, and they have a replacement, which is a little shorty. And both of them, after the cable's put on with the spring in place, and here's your adjuster at the top, you have to plug this bottom. I know people have used Permatex, that's gas impermeable. I use cork. I fit it in there, it works well. This is the top of your let's see here, throttle cable. You can see that there's a small tab here that fits in the top of your carb, and then there's a tab here. They're at 90-degree angles. You can't screw this up, it just goes in, okay? And there's the bottom of the needle. The cable is set through this larger diameter hole and locks in the smaller diameter hole. The spring keeps it in place. The setting for this is the third hole from the top, second hole from the bottom. So when you put it together, you should be able to see the top hole. There's 4 holes, and there's a locking pin that holds it in place. That's all there is to that. It's easy. Can't screw it up.